The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report with Dom and Charles.
Hello, Charles.
And Dom, last Friday, huge news in the world of crypto. Which
It's worth something again?
No,
okay.
no. Sam Bankman-Fried.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Who was the head of FTX. It was the second biggest crypto firm in the world.
Pronounced fucked, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're calling it FTX, but I think the correct pronunciation is actually fucked.
Fucked.
Yeah.
So he'd been on trial for the small crime of stealing $8 billion.
I mean, is stealing the word to use, or is reinvesting in his customers' best interests a better way to put it?
Well, that is how his defence team essentially put it. But he was convicted.
Oh, okay. So we can say he's definitely a thief.
Yes.
Right.
So he's convicted of stealing $8 billion, which is quite a lot of money.
It's amazing. I mean, hats off to the guy. That's a lot of money to steal.
And look, I want to go through, first of all the things that he did right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. That's useful for lessons.
Yeah, and then all the things that he probably could have done a little bit better, in terms of stealing.
That's good, yeah.
But then after that, Dom, I want to pose the question to you, which is, what would you do if you stole $8 billion?
Let's get into that after this.
First of all, let's go through the things that he did right.
Okay.
First one is he sponsored a lot of cricket over the years.
Yes, he did, didn't he?
Yeah.
So nice of him.
It was just like 18 months ago that FTX started getting into real trouble. It must have been about beginning of 2021. No, 2022 it was. And he was sponsoring the Ashes. Like the FTX was one of the key sponsors in the Ashes.
What an apt metaphor for what was about to happen to his business.
And literally it was during the Sydney Test that his company started crumbling around him. I think he fled the Bahamas at that point, or he was holed up in the Bahamas for a few months.
That's unusual because generally one flees to the Bahamas.
That's right.
Starting in the Bahamas and then committing your crimes is an unusual progression.
And it wasn't until November that the actual cricket, the ICC, came and went, okay, these people are clearly just crooks. We should stop taking their money. And it was during the World Cup, like the T20 World Cup at the end of last year, that they went, okay, well, we've taken all his money, but we're not going to put his logo on the finals.
Right. So they took the money. Presumably they kept the money rather than returning it to the investors.
No,
but like we wouldn't want cricket to be embarrassed by association with FTX. That very ethical, entirely racism-free game. Yeah.
So that was probably the best thing he did. But
thank you, Sam.
The other really good thing that he did, and I think if you were in the process of stealing $8 billion, which I think we can now say for certain is what was going on.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, what you should do is you should grease the wheels of those in power.
Very sensible.
And he had this strange strategy of advertising the fact that he was giving a lot of money to Democrats, and often quite progressive Democrats in the US, and then hide the fact that he was giving pretty much an equal amount of money to Republican politicians as well. And it added up to about $100 million in 2021 and 2022 that he gave. Yeah, the midterms was 2022.
Yeah.
And he gave a huge amount of money in the lead up to that.
Well, that would have been embarrassing for Republicans, Charles, because as you know, I mean, stop the steal has been such a big mantra of theirs, talking about the election in 2020. And Sam Bankman-Fried, he was not on board with stop the steal.
Yeah,
that was not his thing.
That was not a slogan that he could get on board with. And you'd think, because a lot of what he was trying to sort of get done in Washington was the regulation of crypto finance. Now, that may, for somebody who breaks the law, that might be seen as a sort of silly thing to do, right? But if you're wanting to commit a serious crime, one way to get away with it is to essentially write some laws that make what you've done retrospectively legal and just part of the process.
What a good idea, because I guess, Charles, if you think about it, all the crypto bros' assertion when they started operating was, it's a brand new form of money. It's not like old money. This is a new thing. None of the rules apply. It's all free on the internet. You can't regulate us. Whereas I believe the SEC, isn't it, the regulator in the US, thought, well, actually, no, you're taking lots of money from US citizens in return for a service involving finance.
Yes.
Are you potentially a bank? And the people who gave their money to FTX found out that no. FTX was not a bank.
They're not a bank.
And they didn't have, in particular, they didn't have like those gold bullion deposits, which were designed to, shore up the bank. But that was the question being asked. So buying both political parties, I suppose, is one way to try and make sure that you don't have to be regulated.
So they are the things that he did right. The things that he did wrong, and, there's probably quite a long list that he can point to. But the first one, I feel, is that he almost immediately distanced himself from the other people, his co-conspirators. So it wasn't just him doing the stealing. There were 3 other people involved. There was his on and off girlfriend.
/ the woman who ran the arm's length, was Alameda Research.
Alameda Research, which was the hedge fund arm of FTX. And what we've discussed on previous podcasts is the way the whole theft worked was they set up at arm's length, even though they were in bed together, they were arm's length in bed.
Arm's length in bed.
They had quite a large bed.
Arm's length in. We're at arm's length now, Charles. We're sitting quite close to each other. But I mean, your shoulder's about an arm's distance. So
exactly.
If I was to, run the hedge fund arm of the Chaser, and you were to run the Chaser arm, then we'd be completely
at arm's length.
Yeah, at arm's length, we'd be doing the job.
And so the point being that the way it worked was they were completely separate entities, and Alameda just on its own independently made the decision to keep funneling money into FTX.
Yes.
And
in
essentially
the best interest of its shareholders.
Lend money to FTX, which it then was able to
embezzle,
yes, exactly right. Almost immediately, Sam Bankman-Fried started leaking to journalists things like internal chat logs, and I think even his girlfriend's diary he gave to a Wired journalist. And that meant that, literally, I think it was the day that she discovered that he'd leaked the diary to the Wired journalist, that she went straight to the prosecutor's office in New York and went, you know what, I'm willing to do a deal. So the thing is, if you ever want to steal $8 billion, don't betray the people who know how you did it.
And I see what Sam Bankman-Fried was thinking, Charles, because when you love someone, you want to be with them all the time. You don't want to be apart from them.
Yes.
And so when you're going down for potentially hundreds of years of jail time,
yes,
you want to make sure they're implicated so that you'll be doing time
together.
Maybe not in the same prison or certainly not the same cell, but at least spiritually you'll know that the two of you are both caged birds.
You're in it together.
You're in it together, just not literally.
But how does that apply to the other 2 people he threw under the bus?
Didn't they have orgies and do partner swapping?
Oh, no, you're right.
For all I know,
okay.
they were what, a thruple or a fupple?
Yes, no, you're right. That is true. Yes.
What's a 4-person thruple? I'm going to call it a fupple.
A 4G, isn't it?
A 4G.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds like an outdated phone technology. Anyway,
so they were the mistakes, right?
This is really good to know in terms of our own business.
And then the final mistake that he made, which I think was possibly the worst mistake of all, there seems to be some level of arrogance attached to this Sam Bankman-Fried
I mean, what are the odds that a guy that set up a crypto exchange would be a bit of a douche?
Bit of a bro.
Yeah.
And I don't think it helped that Michael Lewis, who wrote Liar's Poker...
and Moneyball, a great investigative journal,
Extraordinary.
Really understands finance.
Yeah. Followed him around even before it started collapsing and was writing essentially a hagiography about him. The book itself is called Infinite Man, Infinite...
Oh, really?
Infinite Wisdom or something.
I'm quite surprised. Michael Lewis is, is quite a savvy journalist.
Oh, no, he only released it a few weeks ago.
I loved Moneyball.
I started reading it and it was unreadable because it's this hagiographic sort of look at, the much misunderstood guy who stole $8 billion.
That's so bizarre.
Yes, he's been totally... And he actually, in his press circuit, he sort of admitted, I sort of got a bit caught up in...
Reality distortion field.
Yeah, that's right.
But you know what this means, Charles? He must have had crypto with FTX.
Yes. That's
desperately trying to pump and dump.
The crucial mistake is Sam Bankman-Fried decided to testify in his own trial. Now, the one thing that you do if you steal $8 billion that all lawyers will tell you is whatever you do, don't testify because it gives prosecutors the chance. So the prosecutors have to prove that you've done something. And if you don't say anything at all, then your lawyers are free. I'm not a lawyer, Don, but you've studied law.
I studied law. I'm certainly not a lawyer.
You know that this is true, right?
Well,
which is that
America.
your lawyers, it gives them far more options to go, well, maybe he just stubbed his toe and accidentally pressed that button.
$8 billion. Yeah, but don't forget as well, there's the Fifth Amendment in America, which means that there's a
you can't.
Protection against self-incrimination. So presumably Absolutely. And I don't want to make assumptions, but in the case of Sam Bankman-Fried, I imagine opening his mouth would be self-incriminating. Yeah. By the way, Michael Lewis's book I just checked, it's called Going Infinite.
Yes.
Presumably he didn't realise he was referring to the sentence at the time that he named it.
Yeah. So he spent the last few weeks testifying. I assumed, of course, that the jury would spend a week or two trying to figure out who was guilty, who was not. They took 4.5 hours.
I mean, I'm surprised it took that long. I reckon it took them 5 minutes and they went, let's just have some drinks.
Yeah, that's right.
But we're going to have to go back to our jobs and, partners soon. We've got all this free food. Yeah. Let's just make it look like we spent a long time on this. Because, Charles, in the age of crypto, I mean, transactions happen in an instant, don't they?
No, not in the age of crypto.
Not an FTX.
It takes really long for the blockchain to work.
That's true.
Part of the problem with crypto. So 110 years he's facing in jail, do you reckon?
I do like that these days sentences seem not to have any regard for human lifespan. Like it's like, or should it be 1,000?
Yeah.
He's a white-collar criminal, so he'll still get out in 5. I mean, let's be clear.
Oh, the other real thing that he did right, which I forgot to mention, is that both his parents are legal experts, financial legal experts.
Oh, that's right. He's the kid of two sort of geniuses, isn't he?
And his mum is an expert, a professor in legal ethics.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And is his dad like a professor of irony?
And I have read this chilling account that puts a very convincing argument that his parents are in fact fairly narcissistic, alpha-style go-getters, and that actually they profess that they're doing everything for Sam and everything, but actually at the end of the day they sort of have sunk him themselves. That essentially,
I mean, he's a sunk cost at this point, isn't he?
They helped him do all this stealing. They got huge amounts of gifts. They got tens of millions of dollars worth of gifts out of him while he was in charge.
And Charles, I've always said, if you're a professor of legal ethics and millions of dollars drop into your lap from your son from some new business that they're running, don't ask questions.
Don't ask
Take
questions.
It on trust.
No.
I assume this is ethical. Don't even say that. Just spend the money and enjoy it.
Yes.
And just assume that your lectures around the breakfast table have sunk in at some point. I want to get into what we would do with the 8 billion, Charles, in a few moments as we continue the tale of Sam Bankman-Fried, who has been a huge success in life as long as you take account of all the stealing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that we always place all these moral judgments around what is a good life, whereas, what we should actually be doing is...
Let's find out after this.
The Chaser Report. Less news, more often.
I think the thing is, Charles, it's good to be remembered. And if you just started a crypto exchange that was briefly popular, and then, because here's the thing that's funny about all of this, and there's many ironies, but part of the irony, I presume, is that in between Bankman-Fried funneling all this money out and having the consequences, crypto crashed massively, right?
Yes.
So ironically, okay, he stole all this money from his investors, but if he just left it in crypto, they would have lost most of their money anyway, wouldn't they? Bitcoin has bounced back a bit lately.
Yeah.
But in some senses, if you were able to pay them back, they'd probably say thank you. It's a favour taking our money out of crypto.
Yeah, because what I never understand about any of these cases is why, if you'd set up a sort of business that had taken in, I think it was about $30 billion worth of investors' funds, and you had them under management, and presumably there were completely legal ways to just make a good clip out of that. Like just take, just
even 1%, you're doing fine.
Tell everyone, we're taking 1%, then it's all above board and legal. Why you would bother going to the lengths of then stealing some more on top of that?
Well, isn't the thing, it's basically, you get to the point where you think it's an infinite cookie jar and you just assume there'll always be more money. So it doesn't matter how much you spend because you're so brilliant that you just keep getting more.
And that is certainly true. In the dying days of FTX, where it was clear it was about to collapse, he was begging his investors to give him 24 more hours. He was talking to the feds and saying, look, I've just got to line up some more money from the Saudis to plug that gap and it'll all be fine. And there is a sort of truth to that in terms of modern financial management, which is that if you can keep the scheme going by finding a greater fool and pay back your original people, then the authorities really don't look too hard at what you're doing.
I mean, Jared Kushner, right, did that deal with Qatar and managed to sort of keep, it's like a hamster in a wheel. You kind of keep the wheel spinning a bit longer. And in fact, if I remember correctly, SBF was going to do a deal with Binance, which is the biggest crypto exchange. They were going to bail him out. And then they took a quick look at the financials and were like, holy shit, we're not going near that.
Well, one of the problems is that SBF had paid Binance in these tokens that Alameda Research had created, right?
Yes.
And
I think they would have been wise to that. Binance.
And that was part of the trick on the balance sheet was like, if we value these coins, which are completely illiquid because we own all the coins,
yes,
we value them at $8 billion. And therefore, we're not broke because we've got these $8 billion worth of shiny beads that we invented.
And I've been saying for years, Charles, that the Chaser is a very, worth hundreds of millions of dollars because of all the Chaser coin that we made.
Yes, yes.
Which each one of them is worth actually $1 trillion now. I've just revalued them during the course of this podcast. But this is how it works. This is the bizarre thing about the crypto world is it's just make-believe.
Yes. Well,
all this stuff.
It's a make-believe Ponzi scheme. It is definitely a Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
And as we covered last week, AI is about to collapse the whole thing anyway. Bernie Madoff is going to seem like this tiny little 2-bit operator in comparison to the crypto scheme.
Because the thing about the Bernie Madoffs of this world is he wasn't intending, like, yes, okay, we now say he was stealing, and he was, but he just thought there'd always be more money. This is the thing. So I'm looking forward to, I mean, we talk a lot about the Turing test for whether a computer has artificial intelligence, whether it's sentient, can it pass for a human? I'm looking forward to, we can call it the SBF test perhaps, when an artificial intelligence is able to, of its own accord, create a Ponzi scheme and defraud humans.
Yes.
Then we'll know that a landmark has been reached in AI technology without even any humans being greedy, just because it just wants, I don't know, more Chaser coins or whatever it might be. It's been programmed to try and maximise, which makes me think, Charles, how have we not gotten our own AI going? Why haven't we gotten it on the bleeding edge of this thing? Because it's a great way to, the AI. It was the AI that transferred all that money from our investors. We didn't even realise.
I think part of it is that at its core, AI is fundamentally boring because it can't actually invent anything new. It can just reconfigure stuff that's been already put into it.
Oh, okay. So what it would do, because this is what I've been kind of studying lately. An AI serves up the most likely next word, as we said before. So what it would do is just brew up all the Ponzi schemes of the past.
Yes, exactly.
Madoff, SBF, everything else, the Chaser's subscription scheme in the early 2000s. All those elements. It wouldn't actually come up with something original, but it would come up with Uber.
But it would become up with
Uber's probably a Ponzi scheme too.
A well-optimized version.
It would be very optimized.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would you do if you stole $8 billion?
Bitcoin, obviously.
That's right. Put it all in Bitcoin.
That's a very good question.
Because that's quite a lot of money to have had the power over.
It's crazy. How would you even spend that?
Amazing fall from grace. Well, it's sort of bizarre what he did spend it on. It was things like they were renting a hotel room as their office/orgy palace. And that presumably cost, $25,000 a week or something?
Yeah. To be fair, you could probably buy a house in Sydney for $8 billion.
Hey, ba-dum-ching.
No, but the other thing I was thinking was, at the going rate, doesn't that get you one periscope of a nuclear submarine, $8 billion? Just the one periscope. But in reality, that's what, like 20% of your nuclear submarine. Like that. Compared to what we're blowing on that scheme, it's nothing.
Nothing.
Bankman-Fried is. Compared to ScoMo and Albo.
But what would you maybe renewables or something? You put it into renewables.
If you wanted to invest it, yeah, I guess so.
But what would you do? Like, what would you do with it? What would you do? What would you honestly do? Like, I'm not asking as a joke. I'm asking what would you actually do if you had $8 billion? Now.
I think I would find...
Can I borrow some money?
I think I'd find things that I really liked to invest in at a potential loss. Like, first thing I'd do, in actuality, if I had $8 billion, is I would recreate our comedy club. I would bring it back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I would, day one, I would go, you know what, that was great. It was great. Yeah. And it didn't even lose money at one point. Like, it was actually doing okay for a while there.
Yes.
Giant Dwarf, I'd bring back Giant Dwarf for sure.
Yes.
As a comedy theatre.
I'd buy Triple M.
Oh, would you?
Yeah.
Well, apparently it's not very much at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And just,
have a show.
Get rid of the... Yeah.
You'd just do a show, wouldn't you?
Yeah, just like 9 p.m. till 11 p.m.
Yeah.
Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Be like Charles's nightly ramble. That'd be quite nice. That's a great idea.
What else would you buy?
I would either buy a Tesla or Tesla. I'm not sure which of the two. I'd buy a sport team. I think I'd love to buy a soccer team or something.
Yeah, okay.
Really
which
fun.
one? You could buy any of them. You could buy Manchester United, couldn't you?
You probably could actually for that. Yeah, but that wouldn't be a good investment.
No.
Arsenal's my team. I'd maybe try to buy them. But I could buy Sydney FC and make them good.
Would it be good actually owning the team that you go for?
No, because
then you're not a spectator.
All the fans that hate you.
You want to just be a bit separate from your team. You'd buy the rest of the teams and make them shit.
Yeah,
That would,
you know what you'd do? You know what would be the coolest thing to do? To basically buy art and like the whole of art.
Yeah.
Like anyone making art, you would buy the art.
Yes.
And the amazing thing is it would probably actually pay for itself.
Yes.
Like over time. If every emerging artist literally...
You know what you're talking about? It's basically a Ponzi scheme.
It is.
Yeah.
And you know the federal government has a thing called Art Bank that does this, right? It's actually one of the best things they've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
The federal government buys artwork from emerging artists, like new artists, who desperately need the money. And so it's wonderful and it's good for their CV. They can say they're in the Art Bank collection. Federal government buys them and then sits on them. There's a giant warehouse in kind of Redfern that has all this stuff. Or Alexandria, I think, that has all this stuff.
We should do an Art Bank heist.
We should. And it's a really cool warehouse. So it's a really cool kind of office. But then they rent it out to big corporations. So if you're a giant corporation and you want to have like really great art in your office, you rent it from Art Bank. But then we keep owning it and it keeps getting worth more and more money. And eventually the really good ones end up in the National Gallery or wherever. And it accumulates lots of money. So it's actually, I think it's probably the best bit of public policy Australia has actually ever had. So I'd do a private version of that.
So there you go. Sam Bankman-Fried. Look, it's never a happy story when a crook goes to jail.
Really?
Oh, well, maybe it is actually, yeah. In this case, it is.
Well, I do feel sorry for him a little bit though, because if you look at the world, right, as a white guy from a privileged background in America, what are the odds you'll have any consequences? I mean,
your actions,
you can literally overthrow American democracy, and nothing will happen.
Nothing.
In fact, you'll be neck and neck with Joe Biden in the polls, is what you'll be. Consequences are like people like you and me, Charles. We're allergic to consequences. They never happen.
Yes.
Do they?
No, they don't.
I mean, if you murder someone, maybe there's a chance.
Well,
but just a bit of light fraud.
Hire a good lawyer.
Just a bit of $8 billion fraud.
Yes.
Which goes to show we were never ambitious enough with the Chaser, Charles.
Yes, we should have murdered more people.
No.
Oh, no, you mean embezzled, right?
Who's to say we didn't? Who knows? A lot of stunts went down back in the day. Anyway, so I think, Charles, the aim to us is that our Ponzi scheme with the subscriptions was too small.
And look, if you are listening to this and you've got $8 billion,
Buy the Chaser.
Buy the Chaser, yeah.
And we'll keep running it into the ground for you. You can just buy our shares. Our gear is from Rode. We're part of the Iconoclast Network.
See ya.